The night Adrian Belmont discovered the woman who would destroy his empire, she wasn't supposed to exist. She stood in the shadows of his arranged bride's entourage, a nameless servant with eyes that burned with silent rebellion. One glance, and the ruthless heir to Chicago's most powerful crime family felt something he'd never known: obsession. Within weeks, she would vanish into his bed, reappear carrying his child, and ignite a war between two criminal dynasties that would paint the streets red. This is the story of how a forgotten girl became the only thing a man who owned everything couldn't afford to lose. If you're ready for a tale of forbidden love and dangerous choices, stay with me until the end. Hit that like button and comment your city below so I can see how far this story travels across the world. The February wind cut through Chicago like a blade, merciless and sharp, rattling the floor-to-ceiling windows of the Belmont estate. Inside the warmth of the marble-floored study, Adrian Belmont stood motionless, staring at the city skyline with the detached focus of a man calculating his next kill. At 28, he possessed the kind of cold, refined brutality that made grown men avoid his gaze. Dark-haired, sharp-jawed, and dressed in a suit that cost more than most people earned in a year, he looked every inch the prince of Chicago's underworld. Behind him, his father's voice droned on about duty, legacy, and the weight of the Belmont name. "The Volkovs arrive in 2 hours," Victor Belmont said, his tone leaving no room for argument. "You will meet Natalia. You will be courteous. You will make this alliance work." Adrian's reflection in the glass showed no emotion. "I understand." "Do you?" Victor's voice sharpened. "Because the last time we discussed your future, you seemed to think you had a choice in the matter." Adrian turned slowly, meeting his father's steely gaze. Victor Belmont was 63, silver-haired, and still dangerous. A man who had built an empire on blood and ruthlessness. Age had only made him more calculating. "I said I understand," Adrian repeated, his voice soft as silk and twice as dangerous. "The Volkovs control the eastern ports. We need their distribution channels. I marry the daughter, we consolidate power. Everyone profits. It's business." "It's survival," Victor corrected. "The Italians are pushing into our territory. The Bratva are expanding west. We need the Volkovs, and they need legitimacy in American operations. This marriage secures both." Adrian's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "And if I refuse?" The question hung in the air like gunsmoke. Victor's smile was colder than the wind outside. "Then you're not the man I raised to lead this family. And if you're not that man, Adrian, you're useless to me." The threat was clear. In the Belmont family, weakness was terminal. "There won't be a problem," Adrian said finally, turning back to the window. His reflection showed nothing. No anger, no resentment, no fear. Just the empty calm of a man who had learned long ago that emotions were liabilities. Victor studied his son's back for a long moment, then nodded. "Good. Marcus has prepared the south parlor. The Volkovs will expect traditional hospitality." "They'll get it?" Victor left without another word, his footsteps echoing through the vast hallway. Adrian remained at the window, alone with the city that would one day be his to command, if he survived long enough to inherit it. He'd met Natalia Volkov once before, briefly, at a neutral meeting in New York. She'd been beautiful in the way expensive things often were. Perfect features, designer clothes, and the kind of practiced charm that came from years of training in how to smile without meaning it. She'd shaken his hand with fingers that felt like ice, and he'd felt absolutely nothing. That was fine. He didn't need to feel anything. Love was for civilians, for people who had the luxury of choosing their own lives. Men like Adrian Belmont married for strategy, for power, for the continuation of dynasties built on bones. The intercom on his father's desk crackled. "Mr. Belmont, the Volkov convoy has entered the grounds." Adrian checked his watch. They were early. Eager then. That was useful information. He straightened his tie, buttoned his jacket, and schooled his features into the mask of polite authority he'd worn since childhood. By the time he reached the south parlor, he was every inch the perfect heir, courteous, controlled, and completely unreadable. The room had been prepared with meticulous care. Fresh flowers on the mantel, a fire crackling in the hearth, crystal decanters of expensive vodka and whiskey arranged on the sideboard. Marcus, his father's longtime consigliere, stood near the door, his weathered face betraying nothing. "They're here," Marcus said quietly. Adrian nodded and took his position near the fireplace, hands clasped loosely behind his back. The picture of relaxed confidence. The doors opened. Dmitry Volkov entered first, a bear of a man with iron-gray hair and eyes like frozen lakes. He moved with the heavy confidence of someone who had killed often and well. Behind him came Natalia, and Adrian forced himself to study her with detached interest. She was stunning. Blonde hair pulled back in an elegant chignon, features that could have graced magazine covers. A burgundy dress that probably cost 5 figures. She met his gaze with practiced warmth, her smile perfect and meaningless. "Mr. Belmont," Dimitri's accent was thick but his English precise. "Thank you for welcoming us to your home." "The pleasure is ours, Mr. Volkov." Adrian stepped forward, extending his hand. "My father will join us shortly. Please, make yourselves comfortable." The ritual of greetings and pleasantries began. Dimitri's handshake was exactly as firm as it needed to be. A test. A measurement. Natalia's hand was soft and cold when Adrian brushed his lips across her knuckles in the old-fashioned gesture his father had insisted upon. "You have a beautiful home," Natalia said, her voice smooth and cultured. "The architecture is remarkable." "Thank you. It's been in my family for 3 generations." They were speaking in codes, in the careful language of people who understood that every word carried weight. Behind the polite conversation was the real negotiation. How much power, how much territory, how much blood would this alliance cost? Adrian was about to offer them drinks when he noticed the others. 3 more people had entered quietly, standing back near the doorway. Dimitri's security detail, Adrian assumed at first, but then his eyes caught on the woman standing slightly apart from the guards. She was young, maybe 23 or 24, with dark hair pulled back severely from her face. She wore a simple black dress that marked her clearly as staff, not family. Her posture was rigid, her eyes downcast, and she held herself with the careful stillness of someone who had learned to be invisible. But she wasn't invisible, not to Adrian. There was something about the set of her shoulders, the tightness in her jaw, that caught his attention like a hook. While Dmitri and Natalia settled onto the sofa, while Marcus poured drinks, while the machinery of alliance building ground forward, Adrian found his gaze returning to the woman by the door. She must have felt his stare because her eyes lifted for just a moment. The impact was physical. Her eyes were gray, the color of storm clouds, and in them he saw something that stopped his breath. Not submission, not the careful blankness of a well-trained servant. For one unguarded second he saw fury, pure, burning rage, held in check by what must have been years of brutal discipline. Then she looked away, her expression sliding back into neutral emptiness. But Adrian had seen it, and he couldn't unsee it. "Adrian?" His father's voice cut through his distraction. Victor had entered, was greeting Dmitri with the warmth of old allies. "Come, join us." Adrian forced his attention back to the Volkovs, but his awareness of the dark-haired woman remained like a thorn under his skin. He took his seat, accepted a glass of whiskey he didn't drink, and participated in the careful dance of negotiation and pleasantry. Natalia was exactly what he'd expected. Beautiful, educated, perfectly trained in how to be the wife of a powerful man. She spoke knowledgeably about art and culture, laughed at appropriate moments, and showed absolutely no real personality whatsoever. She would make a fine strategic partner. She would never surprise him, never challenge him, never make him feel anything at all. His eyes drifted back to the woman by the door. She stood so still she might have been carved from stone, but he could see the tension in her hands, clasped tightly at her waist. What was her story? Why did she look at the world with such carefully hidden hatred? Adrian pays attention to details, Victor was saying, drawing him back to the conversation. It's one of his strengths. A necessary quality in our business, Dmitri agreed. He fixed Adrian with a penetrating stare. Tell me, what details have you noticed about my daughter? It was a test. Adrian smiled slightly. She has excellent taste in jewelry. He nodded toward Natalia's necklace, a stunning piece of vintage Cartier. Art Deco, if I'm not mistaken. 1920s? Natalia's smile warmed fractionally. 1925. You know your jewelry. I know valuable things when I see them. The double meaning hung in the air. Dimitri's expression showed satisfaction. This was going well from his perspective. The young Belmont heir knew how to play the game, but Adrian's attention was fragmenting. He couldn't stop himself from glancing at the woman by the door. Who was she? What was her name? The meeting wore on. Discussions of business territories, shipping routes, protection arrangements, all couched in carefully neutral language that could mean nothing to an outsider but spoke volumes to those who understood the code. Natalia participated intelligently, showing that she understood the business she'd been born into. Throughout it all, the dark-haired woman remained motionless by the door. Invisible. Forgotten. Except Adrian couldn't forget her. Finally, after an hour of negotiation disguised as hospitality, Dimitri stood. This has been most productive. Natalia and I should return to our hotel. We have dinner arrangements. Of course. Victor stood as well, all warmth and cooperation. We'll have our attorneys begin drawing up the formal agreements. I think we've found common ground on all major points. Dimitri smiled. Indeed. This alliance will benefit both our families greatly. The words were prophetic, though not in the way anyone in that room imagined. As the Volkovs prepared to leave, Adrian found himself moving toward the door, ostensibly to see them out. In reality, to get closer to the woman who had somehow captured his attention so completely. Your staff are very well trained, he said to Dimitri, keeping his tone casual. I noticed your people have been perfectly unobtrusive. Dimitri glanced back at his security detail and the dark-haired woman. Discipline is essential in any organization. Mira, come. So that was her name. Mira. She moved forward immediately, her steps silent on the marble floor. As she passed Adrian, he caught a faint scent of something clean and simple. Soap, maybe, or plain shampoo. Nothing like Natalia's expensive perfume. For a second, as she walked by, their eyes met again. This time the defiance he'd seen before was gone, replaced by something more complex. Fear, yes, but also a kind of desperate wariness, like an animal that had been hurt too many times to trust anyone. She looked at him like he was a predator. She wasn't wrong. Then she was past him, falling into step behind Natalia as the Volkovs moved toward the door. Adrian watched her go, his mind already working through possibilities he shouldn't be considering. She's pretty, isn't she? Marcus murmured at his elbow, too quietly for anyone else to hear. Adrian's expression didn't change. I don't know what you mean. Of course you don't. Marcus's tone was dry. Just remember who you're marrying, Adrian, and why. It was good advice. Adrian knew it was good advice. He ignored it anyway. That night, alone in his penthouse apartment downtown, Adrian couldn't stop thinking about Mira. He stood at his own window, looking out at the glittering city, and replayed that moment when their eyes had met. The fury in her gaze. The fear. The strange, compelling combination of submission and rebellion. Who was she? Why did she serve the Volkovs? What had put that look in her eyes? He pulled out his phone and made a call. It was answered on the first ring. Yes, sir? Daniel, I need information. Was it Daniel Cruz was his best intelligence operative, a former CIA analyst who had found the private sector more profitable. There was a woman with the Volkovs today, young, dark-haired servant class. Name is Mira. I want to know everything about her. There was a pause. Sir, is this about the alliance? Does it matter? No, sir. I'll have something for you by morning. Adrian ended the call and returned to the window. Below him, Chicago pulsed with life and danger, with opportunity and threat. It was his city, or would be soon. Every street, every business, every secret, all of it would belong to him. But right now, all he could think about was a woman with gray eyes and hidden fire, who looked at the world like she wanted to burn it down. He should forget about her, focus on Natalia, on the alliance, on the empire he was being groomed to inherit. Mira was nobody, a servant, irrelevant to his future. But Adrian had spent his entire life being told what to do, who to be, what to want. For the first time in longer than he could remember, he wanted something that hadn't been chosen for him. He wanted to know her story, and Adrian Belmont always got what he wanted. The next morning, Daniel's report arrived encrypted on Adrian's secure tablet. He read it over coffee in his apartment, his expression growing darker with each paragraph. Mira Sokolova, age 24. Orphaned at 12 when her father, Alexei Sokolov, had been executed by Dmitry Volkov for betrayal. Details of the alleged betrayal were unclear, but the outcome wasn't. Alexei had died screaming, and his daughter had been taken into the Volkov household as property. Not quite a slave, but not free either. A servant bound by her father's debts and her own powerlessness. She'd been raised in that household for 12 years. 12 years of serving the family who had killed her father. 12 years of being invisible, voiceless, worthless. Adrian's hands tightened on the tablet. The report included more details. She was educated. The Volkovs had ensured their servants could read and write, the better to perform their duties. She spoke English, Russian, and some French. She was described by multiple sources as quiet, obedient, and unremarkable. But Adrian had seen her eyes. There was nothing unremarkable about the woman he'd glimpsed. The report concluded with a note that made his blood run cold. Subject's terms of service are scheduled to conclude upon Natalia Volkov's marriage. Per household tradition, she will be released from obligation at that time. Released. The word should have been reassuring. It wasn't. Adrian had spent enough time in the criminal underworld to know that released could mean many things, and freedom was rarely one of them. Servants who knew too much, who had seen too many secrets, didn't simply walk away. Not from families like the Volkovs. He sat back, his coffee forgotten, his mind racing through implications and possibilities. This changed nothing about the alliance, nothing about his duty to marry Natalia and secure the eastern ports for his family's empire. Mira Sokolova was a footnote, a tragedy, a woman he'd never even spoken to. He should delete the report and forget about her. Instead, he made another call. Daniel, I need surveillance on the Volkov household. I want to know everywhere the woman goes, everyone she speaks to. And I want it done carefully. No one can know we're watching. Understood. May I ask the reason? No. Very well, sir. Adrian ended the call and sat in silence, acknowledging the truth he'd been avoiding since yesterday. He was obsessed. One look from a woman he didn't know, one glimpse of hidden fire, and he'd lost his carefully maintained control. It was dangerous. It was stupid. It was undeniable. 3 days later, Adrian attended a formal dinner at the Drake Hotel, another step in the elaborate courtship ritual between the Belmont and Volkov families. Natalia was there, beautiful and poised, playing her role perfectly. They discussed their upcoming engagement party, the guest list, the venue. She smiled at him with practiced warmth, and he smiled back with equal insincerity. Through it all, he watched for Mira. She wasn't there. Of course she wasn't. This was a formal occasion, far above her station. But he found himself disappointed anyway, which only deepened his frustration with himself. You seem distracted, Natalia observed during a lull in conversation. They were alone for a moment at their table while their fathers discussed business near the bar. Adrian focused on her. My apologies, business matters. Of course. She sipped her wine delicately. I hope we'll have time to get to know each other better before the wedding. It would be nice to feel like partners rather than strangers. It was a reasonable request, a kind one even. Adrian should have felt something, gratitude perhaps, or at least respect for her pragmatism. Instead, he felt nothing at all. I'd like that, he lied smoothly. Natalia's smile flickered, and for just a moment he saw something genuine in her expression. Disappointment, maybe, or resignation. She knew, he realized. She knew exactly how hollow this all was. We'll make the best of it, she said quietly. That's all anyone can do. Then the mask was back in place, and they returned to discussing wedding venues with false enthusiasm. Later that night, Adrian received a text from Daniel. Subject spotted at Mercy Hospital. Appears to be visiting someone. Details to follow. Adrian stared at the message. Visiting who? Someone from her past, before the Volkovs? A friend who'd managed to stay in her life despite everything? He shouldn't care. He definitely shouldn't do what he was about to do. He did it anyway. 20 minutes later, he was in his car, driving toward Mercy Hospital with no plan and no justification beyond the burning need to understand the woman who'd somehow gotten under his skin. The hospital's parking garage was half empty at this hour. Adrian parked in the shadows and waited, feeling ridiculous and reckless and completely unable to stop himself. 45 minutes passed before he saw her. Mira emerged from the hospital's side entrance, alone, her shoulders hunched against the cold. She wore a thin coat that couldn't possibly keep her warm, and she walked quickly, like someone trying to outrun her thoughts. Adrian got out of his car, moving to intercept her path. He had no idea what he was going to say. She saw him when she was 20 feet away. Her steps faltered, confusion crossing her face, followed immediately by recognition and fear. "Mr. Belmont?" Her voice was soft, accented slightly, with Russian undertones. "What are you... Who were you visiting?" The question came out more demanding than he'd intended. Her eyes widened. That's not... I should go." She tried to move past him, but he shifted to block her path. Not threatening, but immovable. "Please," she said, and the desperation in her voice cut through him like a knife. "If they find out I spoke to you alone, if anyone sees..." "Who are you visiting?" he asked again, more gently this time. She looked at him for a long moment, and he could see her calculating, fear warring with something else. Defiance, maybe, or just exhaustion. "My mother," she said finally, the words barely audible. "She has cancer, terminal. The Volkovs let me visit twice a month, as long as I don't miss any duties." The casual cruelty of it struck him silent. They let her visit her dying mother twice a month, as if kindness was a privilege to be earned. "I'm sorry," he said, and meant it. Mira's laugh was bitter. "Why? You don't know me. You don't know her. We're nobody to you." "You're right," Adrian admitted. "I don't know you, but I'd like to." The confession hung between them, dangerous and honest. Mira stared at him like he'd spoken in a foreign language. "Why?" she asked finally. It was a fair question. He didn't have a good answer. "I saw you," he said, "at my father's house. The way you looked at the world, like you wanted to burn it all down." Her expression shuddered immediately. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Yes, you do." She wrapped her arms around herself, shivering. "You should marry Natalia. Forget you ever saw me. I'm nothing, Mr. Belmont. I'm no one." "Is that what they tell you?" "It's what I am." Her voice was flat, dead. "A servant. Property. Less than nothing." Adrian took a step closer, and she flinched but didn't retreat. Up close he could see the exhaustion in her face, the shadows under her eyes, the careful way she held herself, like someone who'd learned that vulnerability meant pain. "What if you could be free?" he asked quietly. Her laugh was broken. "Free? People like me don't get to be free. We survive if we're lucky, that's all. But if you could..." "Stop." The word was sharp, almost angry. "Please, just stop. I can't afford hope, Mr. Belmont. Hope is dangerous. Hope gets people like me killed." She was shaking now, from cold or emotion or both. Adrian shrugged out of his coat and held it out to her. She looked at it like it might explode. "Take it," he said. "You're freezing." "I can't. If someone sees..." "There's no one here but us." Slowly, reluctantly, she accepted the coat, pulling it around her shoulders. It swallowed her small frame, and something about the sight of her wrapped in his clothing did strange things to his chest. "Thank you," she whispered. They stood in silence for a moment, two strangers connected by nothing except a chance encounter and the weight of unspoken understanding. "I should go," Mira said finally. "If I'm late, they'll..." She cut herself off, but Adrian could fill in the blanks. "Keep the coat." "I can't." "Yes, you can. Tell them you found it, or bought it used, or whatever story keeps you safe. But keep it." She looked up at him, and for the first time he saw something other than fear in her eyes. Confusion, maybe? Or the fragile beginning of something that might, in another life, have been trust. "Why are you being kind to me?" she asked. Adrian didn't have an answer that made sense, so he told her the truth. "I don't know." Mira nodded slowly, accepting the mystery of it. Then she turned and walked away into the cold night, his coat wrapped around her shoulders, leaving Adrian standing alone in the parking garage with the growing certainty that he'd just made a terrible mistake. He should have let her go, should have returned to his life, his duty, his carefully planned future. Instead, he pulled out his phone and called Daniel. "I need everything," he said. "Her mother's medical records, her daily schedule, every place she goes, everyone she talks to. I want to know her life. Sir, if you don't mind my saying, this seems... I know what it seems like. Do it anyway. He ended the call and stood in the shadows, watching the place where Mira had disappeared. He was obsessed. He was risking everything, the alliance, his father's trust, the careful balance of power that held Chicago's underworld together. And he didn't care. Somewhere in the distance, a siren wailed, and Adrian smiled grimly at the appropriateness of it. Warning, danger, destruction ahead. He was walking straight toward it with his eyes open, and he couldn't wait to watch it all burn. Over the following week, Adrian's obsession deepened into something darker, more consuming. Daniel's reports arrived daily, each one adding another layer to his understanding of Mira's carefully controlled existence. She woke at 5 every morning to prepare Natalia's breakfast. She spent her days managing household tasks under the watchful eye of the Volkov staff. She was allowed out only for supervised errands and those precious twice-monthly visits to her dying mother. It was a cage made of routine and fear. Adrian read each report with growing fury he couldn't quite name. The anger wasn't rational. He barely knew this woman, had spoken to her once in a parking garage for less than 5 minutes. But something about her situation, about the casual way the Volkovs had imprisoned her entire life, made his blood burn. He tried to focus on the alliance, on Natalia, who was perfectly pleasant and perfectly empty, on the business negotiations that would expand Belmont territory into 3 new states, on anything except the memory of gray eyes filled with carefully hidden rage. It didn't work. The engagement party was set for Saturday night at the Blackstone Hotel, a lavish affair designed to announce the union of 2 powerful families to Chicago's criminal elite. Adrian went through the preparations mechanically, approving guest lists and menu selections with the same detached efficiency he brought to everything. "You seem distant," Victor observed 3 days before the party. They were in his study, reviewing security arrangements. "Having second thoughts?" Adrian looked up from the floor plans. "No, just making sure everything goes smoothly." Victor studied him with the penetrating gaze that had built an empire. "The Volkovs are pleased with you. Dmitri says Natalia finds you acceptable." "High praise," Adrian said dryly. "In our world, acceptable is all that matters. Love is for fools and civilians." Victor poured himself a scotch, didn't offer one to Adrian. "Your mother thought she loved me once. That ended badly for everyone." It was the closest his father ever came to mentioning the woman who died when Adrian was 8. Car accident, they'd told him. Years later, he'd learned the truth. She'd tried to leave, to take him away from the violence and blood. Victor had made sure she never got the chance. "I'm not looking for love," Adrian said, and it wasn't quite a lie. He didn't want love. He wanted something he couldn't name, something that had gray eyes and a spirit that refused to break despite 12 years of captivity. "Good," Victor said, "because this marriage is business. The moment you forget that is the moment you become weak." Adrian nodded and returned to the security plans, but his mind was elsewhere. On a woman who wore his coat, on a dying woman in a hospital bed who got to see her daughter twice a month, on the slow-burning fury of injustice that he'd spent his whole life ignoring until now. That evening, Daniel called with news that changed everything. "Sir, I intercepted a conversation between Dmitri Volkov and his head of security about the subject." Adrian's hand tightened on his phone. "Tell me." "They were discussing her release, or rather, the lack of one." Daniel's voice was carefully neutral. "Apparently, the tradition of freeing servants after Natalia's marriage is just that, a tradition, not a guarantee." "Explain." "They're planning to transfer her to a brothel they run in Detroit. Apparently, she's been too costly to maintain for too long, and they want to recoup their investment. The transfer is scheduled for the week after your wedding." The words hit Adrian like physical blows. A brothel. They were going to sell her to a brothel. "Are you certain?" His voice came out colder than the Chicago winter. "I have recordings. They also discussed preparing her, making sure she understands what's expected. I can send you the files if—" "No!" Adrian stood abruptly, his mind already racing through implications and possibilities. "I don't need to hear it. What's her schedule for tonight?" "According to surveillance, she has permission to visit her mother. She usually stays about an hour, returns by 9. Adrian checked his watch, 6:30. Where will she be between the hospital and the Volkov house? Sir, I have to advise against... Where, Daniel? A pause. She takes the bus, Red Line, transfers at Chicago and State. But sir, if you're planning what I think you're planning, this could destroy the alliance. Your father... I'll handle my father. Just tell me where to find her. Daniel sighed. The transfer point, around 8:15. But Adrian, please think about this. One woman isn't worth... Adrian ended the call. His hands were shaking, with rage or something else. He couldn't tell. A brothel. They were going to break her, use her, destroy whatever spark of defiance still lived in those gray eyes. Unless he stopped them. The rational part of his brain, the part trained since childhood to think strategically, screamed warnings. This was insane. Reckless. One impulsive action could destroy years of careful planning, could turn the Volkovs from allies into enemies, could cost him everything his father had built. He didn't care. At 7:45, Adrian was sitting in his car near the Chicago Avenue Red Line station, watching commuters flow past in the cold. He felt like a different person, or maybe like the person he'd always been underneath the layers of training and control. Dangerous. Unpredictable. Free. At 8:12, he saw her. Mira emerged from the station entrance, hunched against the wind, still wearing his coat. The sight of it did something to his chest, tightened something that had been loose his entire life. He got out of the car and intercepted her path. Her eyes went wide when she saw him. Mr. Belmont? What? Get in the car! His voice was harder than he'd intended, sharpened by urgency. She took a step back. I can't. I have to get back if I'm late. You're not going back. He moved closer, saw the fear flash across her face. Mira, I know about Detroit. I know what they're planning. Her face went white. How? No, you're lying. They promised. After the wedding, they said I'd be free. They lied. He kept his voice gentle, despite the fury burning through him. I have recordings, conversations. They're transferring you to a brothel the week after I marry Natalia. You were never going to be free. She stood frozen, and he could see her mind working, processing, trying to deny what part of her had probably always known. Her hands started shaking. No, she whispered. No, I did everything right. I was good. I was quiet. I never... Her voice broke. My mother. I have to take care of my mother. They know that. They don't care about your mother. They don't care about you. You're an asset to them, nothing more. Adrian took a careful step closer. But you don't have to go back. You can come with me. Right now. I can protect you. She looked at him like he was insane. Protect me? You're marrying Natalia. You're allying with them. Why would you... Understanding flickered across her face. This is about guilt. Rich man's charity. You feel bad about marrying into the family that owns me, so you want to ease your conscience. No. Then what? She was breathing hard now, panic and anger warring in her expression. What could you possibly want from me? The question hung between them, loaded with implications they both understood. Adrian could have lied, should have lied. Instead, he told her the truth. I don't know, but I know what they want from you, and I know you don't deserve it. So get in the car, Mira. Let me get you somewhere safe. Safe? Her laugh was broken glass. Nowhere is safe. Not from the Volkovs. They'll find me. They'll kill me and my mother and anyone who helped me. That's what they do to people who run. Not if I stop them. You can't stop them. You're one man. They're... She cut herself off, looking around the street like assassins might materialize from the shadows. I have to go. Please, just forget you saw me. She tried to move past him, but Adrian caught her arm gently. She froze at the contact, her whole body going rigid with trained fear. Let me go, she said quietly, desperately. Please. Come with me, Adrian said instead. One night. Let me show you that there are other options. If you still want to go back tomorrow, I'll take you myself. Why are you doing this? Tears were forming in her eyes now, and she fought them back with visible effort. I'm nobody. I'm nothing. Why do you care? Because when I look at you, I see something I've never seen before, Adrian thought. Fire, trying to survive in the ice. A soul that refuses to break no matter how many times they try to shatter it. Because you deserve better than what they're planning, he said aloud. And because I can help. That's enough. Mira stood trembling in his grip, caught between terror and something that might have been hope. He could see the